Welcome to the 7.6 graphing vertex form notes. Vertex form is f of x equals a times x minus h in parentheses squared plus k, where the vertex is h and k. So first things first, realize that there are different forms of a quadratic. The form of the quadratic we use most of the time is this one. This is called standard form. And we've been using it quite a bit. Note that this a value and this a value are the same. So if there's a number in front of this one, it's the same number in front of this one. But this one has been set up in parentheses like this to find the vertex easier. One thing that I want you to note really quick before we go any further is that this minus sign means that h is always going to be the opposite of what it looks like in the parentheses. Before we kind of jump into graphing it, I do want to remind you that when we were talking about transformations, left was a plus on the inside, right was a minus on the inside, up was a plus on the outside, and down was a minus on the outside. I'll kind of come back to this in just a second, but basically we're just moving these graphs left and right, up and down. That's what these two numbers do. So let's talk about the three main points of the graph. The first one is the vertex. It is the middle point of your parabola, and you cannot graph a parabola without it. The second main point is the y-intercept. And then the third main point that we are going to graph today is the y-intercept reflected. Let's kind of jump into our first examples. So here and here we have our h and our k. But since h is the number being subtracted, what number is being subtracted from x? 2. K is the number being added at the end. What number is being added out here? -3. So our vertex is 2, -3. It's always going to be the opposite of this number, and then this one. The way that I go to graph this point is the same kind of thing as I was talking about right here. It's got a minus on the inside, so that's going to go right 2. That's where this point goes, is right 2. And then the minus on the outside, this -3, makes it go down 3. If I put the point 2, -3 on my graph, remember that this is x, this is y, I'm going right 2, down 3, just like these directions we had talked about with transformations would have taught us. Then, before you move any further, draw your axis of symmetry through the middle of the vertex, like so. For the y-intercept, remember that for a y-intercept, x is always 0. Because if you're on the y-axis, x, this one, is 0 in the middle. So what we're going to do is plug in 0. That's what you can always do for y-intercept no matter what type of equation you have. Now, 0 minus 2 is -2. And -2 squared is 4. So I basically have 2 times 4 minus 3. 2 times 4 is 8, minus 3 is 5. So my y-intercept is here at 5. Don't forget that you can flip that point to the other side. That's what this means. So since it's 2 away from the middle on the left, we're going to go 2 away from the middle on the right and put a point at the same y value. Just like that. And there's your graph. Remember that this shape is called a parabola. Now let's talk about example 2. For this one, your h value is what is being subtracted to get +1. You would have to subtract -1 in order for it to turn into a positive. Again, this is always going to be the opposite. And then k is the number being added at the end, which is 2. So your vertex is -1, 2. Left 1, up 2. Just like that. And then don't forget to draw your axis of symmetry through the middle. And plug in 0 for x to find your y-intercept. So I'm just rewriting this, but instead of x, I'm changing it to 0. 0 plus 1 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. So I have -4 times 1 plus 2. Well, that's just going to be -4 plus 2 is -2. So go to the y-axis, at -2, put a point, and don't forget to flip it across. And now you've reflected the y-intercept. Now let's talk about how to write the equation. So just like how this became the opposite and this stayed the same for the vertex, we're going to do the opposite part, except for we want to put it in the equation instead. So you know it needs to look something like this, because all of these have parentheses with x in them, squared. Parentheses with the x in it, squared. The number in the middle is the opposite of the x value, see? So the opposite of the x value is going to be +3. And then this one stays the same. That's it. You can put a number in front if you want, because it doesn't tell you any more information, but you don't have to. And then the same idea happens on this one. Start with the right setup for vertex form, which is parentheses x squared. And then the opposite of the x value goes right here. The y value goes on the outside. Ta-da!